Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and people can jump in as they come in. But we're going to go ahead and get started since it's 5 after. So, welcome to today's session on the execution phase, often called the doing phase of project management. This is where plans become reality, deliverables are produced, and the project manager's leadership skills are tested every single day. Everything we covered is grounded in the PMBOK Guide 7th edition and aligned with Rita Mulcahy's PMP Exam Prep 11th edition, which is the gold standard for PMP and CAPM exam preparations. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling here. So here's what we're going to cover today. We are going to start by placing execution in context within the project lifecycle, then move through all 10 executing processes organized by knowledge area. The heart of today's session covers how project work is actually managed, directing the team, managing quality, developing people, communicating with stakeholders, and handling risk and procurement activities that happen during execution. We close with critical change control process and the work performance data flow, two concepts that appear heavily on both the PMP and CAPM exams. So we're going to move right on here. Execution, as you can see, is phase 3 in the product life cycle. It's where we take the approved project management plan and actually do the work. Notice where you're at with the marker on the slide deck. There's two critical points here. Execution is the phase where project resources are most heavily consumed, more budget is spent, more people are working, and more decisions are made during execution than in any other phase. The next one is monitoring and controlling does not come after execution. It runs concurrently throughout execution and all the other phases. Your job is constantly tracking performance while managing project work. Of the 49 PMBOK processes, 10 belong to the executing phase, process group phase, making it the second largest group after planning, which has 24 processes, as we learned in the last session. These 10 processes span 8 different knowledge areas. So from RMC, a key principle for them is the project manager spends most of their time in execution, communicating, managing the team, resolving issues, and protecting the plan from unauthorized changes. So why does execution matter so much? There's 5 reasons, and we have them right here on the screen, so we'll talk about each one of them. The first one is it delivers the value. A beautiful project management plan is worthless if the team can't execute it. Execution is where stakeholder value is actually created. The second reason is it consumes most resources. All right, so studies show that 80 to 90% of the project budget is spent during execution. When budgets blow up and schedules slip, it almost always starts here. Effective execution protects the organization's investment. The third reason is it tests leadership. The PM is simultaneously managing a team, communicating with stakeholders, resolving conflicts, making decisions under uncertainty, and protecting the plan. This is where you, as the PM, your competence or incompetence becomes visible to everyone. Reason 4 is where plans meet reality. No plan survives contact with execution unchanged. Risk materialize, unexpected issues emerge, and the PM must adapt. The difference between a good PM and a great one is how they navigate these moments. Your RMC principle here on this slide is that Rita Mulcahy is very explicit. The PM spends most of their time in executing. It is where project management moves from planning and process to people and performance. So let's go ahead and map the terrain. There are 10 executing processes across those 8 knowledge areas. So let me call out the key patterns here that you see on your screen. Integration, so that's processes 4.3 and 4.4. Process 4.3 is the core executing process. It's where work is actually performed and deliverables are produced. Everything flows through 4.3. Process 4.4 focuses on knowledge management and the lessons learned register. Your resource, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 3 of the 10 executing processes belong to the resource management more than any other knowledge area. This signals that people management is the PM's number one executing priority. Single processes, quality, which is 8.2, communications, 10.2, risk, 11.6, procurement, 12.2, and stakeholder, 3.3, each have one executing process. These are all about executing the plans created during the planning phase. So from RMC's perspective, in executing your primary role is to make things happen according to the plan while managing the team and stakeholders who make that possible. And here's an exam tip for you, which is know which knowledge area each executing process belongs to. This is frequently tested on both the PMP and the CAPM exam. So process 4.3 is the heartbeat of execution. Every other executing process either supports or feeds into 4.3, which is direct and managed project work. There's four key things that you do in 4.3 as the PM. Produces deliverables. This is the actual work where the actual work gets done. Team members execute the task, produce the outputs, and the project moves forward. The second item is it generates work performance data. This is raw data. Unanalyzed observations like task A is 60% complete, or we've spent 45,000 this week. This data flows into monitoring and controlling item for our task 4.5, where it becomes work performance information. Item number 3 is your maintains the issue log. Issues are problems that have already occurred, unlike risk, which are future uncertainties. The issue log tracks those. So item number 4, you're going to submit change requests. When something goes wrong or needs to change, the PM generates a formal change request, not an informal verbal conversation. Here's a critical data flow for you. Work performance data, 4.3 in executing, work performance information, 4.5 in monitoring and controlling, and work performance reports, which goes to the stakeholders. Okay, so make sure that that's how that flows. And as far as the exam is concerned, a tip for the exam here would be know this distinction cold. Data is raw, which is in executing. Information is analyzed in monitoring and controlling, and your reports go to your stakeholders. Now, there's two often important overlooked executing processes. First one is manage project knowledge, which is 4.4. So this is all about capturing and sharing knowledge during execution, not just at project close. So you've got two types of knowledge, and if you've gone through any of my classes, you know we've talked about these in the classes. But there's two types of knowledge, and that's explicit knowledge, which can be documented. It's things like policies, procedures, data, specifications, things that are easy to share. And then you have tacit knowledge. This is personal know-how, judgment experience, and much harder to capture and share. The lessons learned register is the primary output. RMC is explicit on this. Capturing lessons continuously throughout the project is a key. If a key team member leaves, you want their knowledge documented, not lost, right? So if somebody leaves the project and they were one of your experts, you want to have all of their processes and the things that they do captured, so somebody else can step in and pick that ball up and run with it. 8.2, manage quality, that process. So it's the audit's quality process. It ensures the team is following the right quality standards and procedures. This is different from control quality, which is 8.3, which inspects actual deliverables. Quality audit is a key insight. An audit is an independent review. Even if the PM thinks quality is fine, an objective audit may find those gaps that may exist that you might not be aware of. Critical distinction here for the exam. Manage quality 8.2 is in executing, which equals quality of process. Control quality is 8.3, and that's done in monitoring and controlling. That equals the quality of your deliverables. And then quality control happens before validation of scope, which is task 5.5. So gold plating, be careful of gold plating exam traps. So students sometimes think that adding extra features is good quality. PMI says no, it is an unauthorized scope change. So please be aware of the gold plating. And I know I've addressed that several times before, but it's important. So you want to make sure that you continue to look out for that. So now we got 3 resource management executing processes. This is the largest group in execution. So the first one, which is 9.3, which is acquire resources. So um, that process, 9.3, obtains the team members and physical resources needed for the project. Resources can come from inside the organization, which is assigned by functional managers, or from outside contract vendors. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Glad to have you. Can you hear me? Mike, if you're talking, you're muted. I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So in a matrix organization, the PM must negotiate with functional managers for resources. Your output here is physical resource assignment and project team assignments. So the next one is 9.4. Mike, do you have any questions? As I can't hear you if you're talking. Are you able to hear me at all, Mike? Well, I'm going to go ahead and keep going here. You'll be able to hear me soon. So 9.4 is develop team, right? So it improves the team performance, both individually and collectively. You have key tools here that you'll deal with. And one is training, which will fill those skill gaps. Then you have team building, which is going to improve cohesion and trust, and co-location. So having a war room, for example, having everybody in the same room. Um, Give me 1 second here. Okay, so your mic is not working. Gotcha, Mike. Okay, so if you have any questions, just text them to me through LinkedIn, and otherwise, I'll just keep going through the material. Okay. Let's see, where was I? So co-location, basically having a war room, so to speak. Okay. Physically pacing the team together dramatically improves communication. Recognition and rewards are also good. It motivates and it acknowledges your performance for your folks. Things like the Tuckman's model will be heavily tested, right? And the Tuckman's model covers the following things. When a team first gets together, they're going to be in the forming stage, and this is where they get oriented. The roles are really unclear at that point, and people are pretty polite here. Then they move into the storming phase once you push your team together. Conflict starts to happen, competition starts to happen. You start to have disputes amongst the roles. And here's where you have to provide that structure to get that team focused. Next, you move into the norming stage, and this is where trust starts to build. Teams establish the norms, and collaboration starts to grow amongst the team. Once they go through the norming stage, they then get into the performing stage. This is where you have high performance and cohesive, self-directed teams. And this is the stage that you really want to get these folks to. Okay. Adjourning is the final stage after performing, and that's when the project ends and where the team disbands. Give me 1 second here. I want to make sure, Mike, you can hear me. So Mike, I just texted you via LinkedIn there. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. So if you can, text me in LinkedIn and let me know you can hear me. All right. The next one is task 9.5, which is manage the team. So this is where you track performance, you resolve conflicts, and deal with any managed changes. Loud and clear. Okay, good. All right. So again, Mike, if you have any questions, just type it in LinkedIn. We'll adapt. We'll improvise, and we'll overcome on the issue here. Not sure why your mic's not working. Hopefully you're signed in properly, and that's why you might not be signed in properly. Okay. So like I said, 9.5 is where you're going to track performance. You're going to resolve those conflicts and manage changes. Conflict resolution, there's it goes from best to worst in order here, right? So here's how you would deal with those. Okay, go ahead and try to log out and log back in. We'll see if it makes a difference. And I'll hold off with where we're going right now. So go ahead, Mike. Hey, Mike, I think I'm going to be able to hear you now. Go ahead and give me a test. No, there we go. And I can see you now too. Okay.
Yeah, internet dropped. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and if you want, you can turn your camera off. That kind of when you have the cameras on, that does affect the bandwidth a little bit. So as long as I can hear you, we're good. Okay, and this will flow a little bit better. Okay, so now here's how you deal with for the exam. Right, here's how you do conflict resolution. Um, the first type of conflict resolution, again, I'm going to go from the best one to use to the worst one, right? The first one is you're going to collaborate and problem solve. So this is where you're trying to set up that win-win situation. And by the best way to do that is to address the root cause of the issues. The second one, way of conflict resolution that you could end up using is where you want to get your team to compromise or reconcile, right? Or reconcile. You want to have both give something up to kind of work the issue out. The third one is smoothing or accommodating. This is where you downplay the differences temporarily, right? And you get them to kind of go, okay, yeah, I got it. We got some differences. Let's deal with that a little bit later if we can, but let's move forward on what we're working here right now, and then we'll
Where are
try
we
to.
at on the managed team part? I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
What portion are we on? Are we on the 9.5?
Yeah, right here with conflict resolution. Okay.
Gotcha. Just making sure.
Gotcha. And then the last way, which is the worst way, is if the team totally withdraws or tries to avoid the situation at overall. Sometimes you have. I'm sorry.
Oh, someone came in. I'm taking.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, that's the worst way of doing it because really you're just passing the buck down the road, right? And by doing that, you're going to end up causing bigger problems down the road because sooner or later you're going to have to deal with that conflict. Okay, now let's give me a second here, make sure we did. Yeah, okay. So I did just talk about Tuckman's ladder, but we'll cover it again here, right? So Tuckman's model describes the predictable stages that project teams go through. So you want to understand where your team is, and it's going to allow you to adapt your leadership style based on where your team is. So again, in the forming stage, this is where team members are polite, they're cautious and they're kind of filling out their roles as well as everybody else's. So in that forming stage, conflict is usually pretty low, but that also means productivity is also pretty low. So your job is to provide structure and clarity to help that team get into you really want to get them up into that performing stage. So the next stage that they will move into from there, and like I said, Tuckman's ladder is going to be tested pretty heavily on the exam, they're going to go through the storming phase. So this is where a lot of your project teams, when they're first forming up, this is where they get stuck because conflicts start to arise here as team members start to push back and compete for the roles of who's who in the zoo on the team. And they actually tend to challenge the PM's authority. This is all normal, and every team goes through it, but it's your job to provide that clear direction and facilitate resolutions to those conflicts, not suppress the conflict. Because again, if you suppress it, it's going to continue to grow and it's going to be harder to deal with later. You always want to deal with that as soon as those conflicts come up, and you want to work your way through and try to make it a win-win situation for everybody if you can do that. Next, the team will then go into that norming phase. So once they've kind of worked their way through that storming phase and what happens is they start to begin to trust each other, right? The team will then start to establish its own norms on how they do things. The communication will start to improve and cooperation amongst the team starts to grow. This is where your productivity starts to really rise. Okay, so a lot of times teams move through norming pretty quickly, right? But it is a stage that they do before they get into the full-fledged performing stage. So this is where the team is now a high-performing unit, right? They're self-directed, they're cohesive, and they're very productive. So here you can start to delegate things more freely. And this is the goal, to have every team is to be in that performing stage. And the final stage there of Tuckman's model is the adjourning phase. So this is when the project ends and the team has to disband. Some team members experience a sense of loss when this happens, and your job is to facilitate proper closure. You want to recognize their contributions and support transitions. So for the exam, if a question describes a team experiencing conflict over roles and challenging the PM's authority, the answer to that is going to be there in the storming phase. And the PM should provide clear structure and facilitate resolution here. Okay, so another thing that's kind of important to not forget about is that teams can actually regress to earlier stages when new members join or a major change on the team actually occurs. Okay, so you don't want to forget about that. So Mike, over your years of doing project management, have you noticed that your teams, when you put them together, pretty much go through these stages?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, most teams do, and it's just a matter of helping them get to that next stage, right?
And it kind of reminds me of,
What's that?
first I look at us as conductors. That's what I always associate our role with, as a conductor.
Right.
Everybody work, but it also reminds me of boot camp because they use kind of same process. You got to build the trust. No one trusts each other. Kind of
Yep.
similar to that.
Yeah. So first they go through that shock and awe phase, right? Like, what am I doing here? Right.
Yep.
That's
And who
the
can I
whole forming
trust?
stage. Who can I trust?
Yep.
That's when they start going through the storming phase, right? You're gonna have your
Yep.
teams are going to kind of meld together a little bit there. But yeah, that's a good analogy. Very good.
Yeah, I always say the drill sergeant's the conductor.
Yep, there you go. All right. So next up is we're going to talk about managing communications and stakeholders, right? Again, this is still all in execution, but task 10.2 from your ECO, right? The PMP ECO, the exam content outline. That task is manage communications. And I think, give me a second here right now, I believe. Yeah, that's the task that we're working on this week, right? In domain 2, task 2 is managed communications. So this is actually pretty interesting because this is where we're at right now. So if you go back and look at Monday and Tuesday's posts, and even Wednesdays and the questions from Thursday, they're all on managed communications. So the timing of that's pretty great. All right, so you got two executing processes that keep project connected to the human side of project management, and that is managing the stakeholders and managing communications. So 10.2 is execute communications management plan. So creating, collecting, and distributing project information to the right people at the right time in the right format is crucial here. Okay. So you have the communications channel formula. Have you see it right here, Mike? N times n minus 1 divided by 2. This is how you're going to determine how many communication channels that you need. This formula you're going to need to know for the exam. This is the hardest math that you will do on the test. Okay, so all those earned value management formulas, you don't have to do the calculations for those. That's going to be done. You have to decipher what's coming out of those. But this one, they're going to ask you to calculate, and it'll be a simple one. They'll give you a test will probably be like, so you've got 6 team members, or you've got 4 team members, and a new team member shows up. So how many new communication channels are you going to need to have, right? And really, you just do that formula. You'll see the answers there. And you've got a calculator on the exam software when you're doing the exam, so it's really easy to calculate. This formula you do need to know. So, so for example, if you're doing the formula, so say you have 5 team members, you're going to end up with 10 channels. You got 10 members, you're going to have 45 channels. If you got 15 members, you're going to have 105 channels. If you just do the math, you'll be able to see how that comes up. But noticing how adding people really exponentially increases the complexity. So this is why team size matters, and why the PM must really actively manage communications, because the more team members you have, the more channels and opportunities you have to have communication slip.
Hey, where did they get that formula from? How did they derive that?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I never thought any further about it, or where that originated from, but that is the formula that PMI uses to determine that. So if you play around with that, and if you use the communications study tool that's in the group here, you'll get to actually calculate that stuff out, and you'll see how all that works. But it's a simple formula, and so if you see the example, right, the formula is n times n minus 1, right? So 10 times 9, right, which is 10 minus 1 is 9. So 10 times 9 is 90, divided by 2, 45 channels.
Yep.
I don't know how they came up with the algebra to do that, but they did. All right, so let's see. A key distinction here is that communications management plan, it defines what gets communicated, where 10.2, the process 10.2 here in executing, is the one that actually does the communication. That's why it's managed communication. So that's the doing part. Managed stakeholder engagement, which is 13.3. This is all about building and maintaining that relationship with those stakeholders. So not just sending them the information. When you're going through any of my classes, I stress from day one, your job is to build relationships with your team, with your stakeholders, with your customers, even in your chain of command there in the organization that you're working for, especially with stakeholders. Like if you're in an organization where it's a functional organization, so those functional managers, you want to build those relationships with them and build that trust with them. And, even express some concern to them. Hey, I'm really interested in how you guys do things and how you're managing things. That way, when my project starts, I know how to deal with you, so we don't have to, butt heads. I want to know how I can help you when you have to provide me people for a project. So how can I best support you to where, it makes things easier when we have to move into a project and I have to use some of your resources. So building those relationships is a good thing. And sometimes it's just taking a couple of minutes out of your day to come up and express some concern with them, or at least, show them some empathy and kind of give them, how can I help you help me kind of deal, right? Those things all work. So now there's five when it comes to managing your stakeholders. There are five engagement levels, which you'll see right here, right? There's unaware, so that stakeholder doesn't know about the project at all. Resistant is where stakeholders oppose the project in and of itself. You got neutral ones who really don't care one way or the other. They don't support it or oppose it. You have supportive, which is where they actively back the project, and then you have leading. Leading stakeholders are ones that are basically being champions for the project. So um, you're going to have to categorize your stakeholders into those different categories so you can easily identify how best to deal with them. So your goal is to identify where each stakeholder is on that scale and where they need to be, and then close that gap. So this analysis is it's you need to kind of keep this confidential because your stakeholder management plan specifically, you're going to have stuff in there that really identifies how you're engaging with people, and you're going to be identifying whether they're difficult to deal with, or and here's the plan on how to get them to be not difficult, right? So there's a lot of confidential information in there, so make sure that your stakeholder management plan stays confidential, right? You don't want to let that slip out anywhere. For the exam, a key rule here is managed communications equals managed stakeholder engagement. One is about information flow and the other is about relationships. Okay, so just because you're managing communications, it doesn't mean that you're managing stakeholder engagement. Okay, they're two separate issues. All right, next is risk response and procurement and execution. So these are the tasks from the ECO that come into play during execution. Um, so the first one is implement risk responses, right? So you got 11.6 there, and the other is 12.2, conduct procurements. You got to understand these specific things. So your implement risk response is the only risk management process in the executing process group. This is frequently tested on the exam. So processes 11.1 through 11.5, which is plan risk management, and that's through plan risk response. Those are all in planning. 11.6, implement risk responses is the executing right phase. And then 11.7, where you're monitoring risks, that's in your monitoring and controlling phases. Mike, do you have a copy of the ECO?
I do not believe so.
Okay, so in the references here, so when we get done with this, I'll show you exactly where that's at. You need to base your study plan based off of that ECO. So what I'm doing in the study groups each week is I cover a different task from a different domain each week. All right, but you're trying to get this done in 4 weeks, so I put together a 4-week study plan for you. All right, and it's heavily tied to the ECO, and you want to have a printout of that because those are the items that you're going to be being tested on in this exam, right? The PMBOK 7 one. All right, let's see. So where were we? Yeah. So when a risk was identified in the planning actually occurs, right? Process 11.6 kicks in. The pre-approved response plan is executed. So when a new risk is discovered during execution, you're going to document it in the risk register immediately. You're then going to analyze it using both qualitative and quantitative as appropriate. And you're going to develop a response plan. So never wait for the next planning cycle. Just go ahead and kick that off and start doing that. So risks, you have two types of risk, right, Mike? Do you know what they are? One's a good risk and one's a bad risk. What do we call those? You still with me, Mike? Nope, just lost him. Let's see if he comes back in. All right. Well, hopefully Mike will pop back in here. So for now, you've got two types of risks can be categorized in two ways. One is a threat, which is the bad type of risk, and the other is opportunity, which is the good type of risk. So whenever an opportunity or a threat actually becomes a thing, right, you may have planned for it, but once it is now active and it's here, it actually becomes an issue. So PMI says to never confuse the two, right? A risk is uncertain and in the future. An issue has already happened and needs to have immediate action. So the issues go into the issue log, risks go into the risk register. Just keep that in mind. So now we'll move on to the conduct procurement. So process 12.2 is where vendor relationships become official. Bids are received, evaluated, and the contract is then signed. So there's different types of contracts, and you'll see them on here under contract types matter, and that is a fact. And the important part about these contracts is understanding who bears the risk on them. So a fixed price, the seller is going to be the one who bears the risk. Hey, Mike, you're back. I think I can hear you. I heard a squelch kind of deal once you signed back in. Can you hear me okay?
How about now?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I got booted out. I took a job part-time as a security guard at Campbell University.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sitting in our little office right now because we got a graduation getting ready to go on.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, like I said, I've been recording this whole thing, so you can always go back and watch the whole thing over again, the parts that you missed. So that way it'll give you better context of the whole thing here. But right now I'm talking. Yeah, go ahead.
What you're covering, is this matter of fact on the PMP?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're going to be tested on. So every one of these tasks that you see that I'm talking about, those are all from the PMP ECO, which is the exam content outline, which is PMI is telling you these things are going to be on the test. You need to know these tasks. Okay.
See, this is different from the other class I took. They didn't cover.
Yeah, they probably should have. And that's okay. You're in the group now, and we're going to get you through this, right? Just trust my process. Believe me, it works. Okay.
I got you.
So go ahead.
Tomorrow, if I hit you up on LinkedIn, can you walk me through the BMT website?
Yeah, I sure can. Absolutely. Yeah, give me a holler tomorrow.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay. Yep, no problem. Okay, so let me go back just a little bit. I asked you a question right before you got pulled out, right? And I was talking about the risk versus issue. Okay, so there's two categories of risk. Do you know what those are? You have good risk and you have bad risk. So what is a bad risk called? And it's important for the test.
Oh my God. Like I said, I was trying to tell you earlier, I'm having a brain fart from hell.
That's okay. That's why we're doing all this stuff. So a bad risk is called a threat. Okay.
Yeah.
A good risk is called an opportunity. Okay.
Yep, you're right.
Now both threats and opportunities are just that. They're risks until they actually come into play. Right. So if it arrives, right, in the planning process, you're trying to identify as many risks, both threats and opportunities as possible. And you're going to come up with a risk response plan on how to deal with those if they end up becoming a thing, right? So when they become a thing, whether it is a threat or an opportunity, they then become an issue. Okay. Because an issue is something you absolutely have to deal with right now, right? So, and you handle the two differently. Risks, you update the risk register for, right? So if something changes about that risk or the probability of that risk happening sooner rather than later, you're going to make an adjustment to the risk register. Once they become an issue or they become a thing, they then go into the issue log, and you're now tracking that issue and everything that you did to make that issue or to handle that issue is going to go into that issue log, and those things are going to be collected when you're in the closing phase. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that's a pretty important part, understanding the differences between risks and issue, and a lot of people get those mixed up. So do you got a good understanding of that over that just little few minutes there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now we're talking about the procurement piece, right? So this is where we either we're buying stuff, right, or we're building it in the in-house, and this might be where we actually have to contract out to other folks. So let me go back here. So 12.2 in the execution phase, right? It says conduct procurements. This is where your vendor relationships become official, right? So this is where you're dealing with bids that are received. You're going to be evaluating all of those vendors that are trying to sell you something. And then you're going to sign a contract once you make that decision. So the contract types and where the risk lies in those contracts, you're definitely going to need to know for the test. Okay. And again, these study tools I have really breaks this stuff out for you, and they're great tools to study. So on Saturday, I'll take you through the website, but I'll also take you through the study group that you're in and show you where all the tools and stuff are for you to study from. Okay. But there's different contract types in a predictive environment that we're talking about right now. So you have fixed price. This is where the seller is going to bear the cost risk. And this works best for well-defined scope type projects. You have cost reimbursable, and this is where the buyer, right, bears the cost risk, and it's best for undefined scope. So is time and material. Time and material contracts is kind of a hybrid of the two, right? So the risk for time and material is a shared risk between the buyer and seller. And it's good for unclear scope where you have a kind of a fixed ceiling price, or you can only spend this much money kind of deal, right? So time and material is good for that. Another key principle to keep in mind here is that once a contract is signed, it is legally binding. And you as the PM must manage the project in compliance with those contract terms. Now, as the PM, you've got to understand what your organization is as far as procurements go. You're going to have two types of procurement organizations in any organization. You're either going to be a centralized procurement department, which is where you have one specific group that does all your procurements, and those people are experts on how to get into contracts. So you might have a lawyer that's part of that, but you're going to have experts that know how to do all those purchasing things. You as the PM are not responsible for any of that, but you're the subject matter expert. So you're the one that's telling them exactly what you need. So building a relationship with that procurement department is also very important. You need to go to them and say, hey, how do you guys do what you do? So I can then turn around, and when I need stuff, I can put it in the format that you need it in, or I can provide all the additional information. What is it that you need from me to help this procurement process through? You are not responsible for the procurement process in a centralized organization, but you are overall responsible for the project, and you need to understand what their process is. In a decentralized organization, you're it, right? You'll be the one doing the purchasing. You'll be the one setting up the contracts. Not the best situation to be in, but it's going to depend on your company, and you're going to have to follow those rules of the road for how to do procurement. Hopefully, you would be in one that has a full-fledged procurement department. Okay, things to remember for the exam. All right, so integrated change control. Most of the time, integrated change control is a monitoring and controlling process, right? So 4.6 is one of the tasks in monitoring and controlling, but it's triggered constantly during execution. So it's critical for both the exam and for real project work to understand how and where exactly your integrated change control process starts and ends. Okay, so technically, like I said, the this task, which is integrated change control during execution, is a monitoring and controlling process. It's activated every single day during execution, and here's the typical flow of that. So the first thing that would kick it off would be a deviation or a request happens, right? A schedule slip, a stakeholder request, a risk that materializes, a defect has been discovered, something has changed or needs to change. So that's the first reason that you would trigger the integrated change control, right? So you notice that in execution, it gets you're doing monitoring and controlling at the same time that you're doing execution. So that kicks off or triggers the integrated change control process that happens in monitoring and controlling. The next trigger would be, or the next thing that you have to do. So once a trigger has occurred, the next thing you have to do is submit a formal change request. This is not negotiable. There's no verbal approvals to go ahead and make the change in a predictive environment. And right now, specifically, we are talking about the predictive environments. Agile is a whole nother story on how you deal with change. But there's no verbal approvals. There's no informal, hey, let's just do it kind of decisions. Every change requires a written formal change request. This actually protects not only the project, but it protects you as the PM. Okay, so you can't just make willy-nilly decisions to change things on the fly. That does not work.
Well, question about that, because I've done CCBs in the
You've
past.
done what?
The CCB, the change control,
right?
And I hated them with a passion because that's one of the ways for people to call you out because they want to make themselves look good. But you're talking about what program this falls under. The other one, wouldn't that be iterations? Where you don't do CCB?
Yeah, there is no in Agile, right? Or in any of the Agile, so Scrum or Agile.
Yeah.
Like that, change is dealt with in an entirely different matter. There is no integrated change control board, right?
Yeah.
Plan-driven projects do not like change. However, being realistic, PMI says we know things are going to change, right? So you have to have this integrated change control board. And I don't know about it. I don't know about your experience where you've been called out specifically on things, but you as the PM, as far as, and again, I'm teaching you how PMI says you have to know this for the test, right? In the real world, I know things don't run exactly the way PMI says that they should run. Got it? Check all over it, right? The task at hand that we have is to get you through the test, right? And PMI's role is to define globally, this is how this should work. So that's what they're going to test you on. Now, realistically, do I go through integrated change control on things? Well, most of the time I'm working in a hybrid environment and I don't have to because most of the stuff that I do is more on the agile side and it's easy for me to make changes like that. But on the other side of our contract, the engineering side of it, they do have to go through the integrated change control because any change in that that baseline for the whole system that we work on affects everything else. So you have to do that analysis. You got to figure out, okay, is this change something we actually have to do? Is this a governance issue? And if it is, how is it going to affect everything else? So there is absolutely a time and place for the integrated change control board.
I basically had to deal with that during working with ACC, Air Force Space.
Right.
And they always had someone that always liked to try to look better than everybody.
Yeah, and that's when you just kind of you, depending on who they are, right? You got to kind of deal with that offline from that and try to find. Try to find a way to try to find a way to effectively mitigate that issue, right? All right. So first thing that, like I said, once you you know there's a deviation or there's a request for a change. You're then going to submit the change. And at that point, then the CC board's going to get together and they're going to actually do that evaluation, right? They're going to analyze the scope, schedule, and cost, quality, risk, and resources to determine what that change, which of those things that I just mentioned is going to have to change based off of this request. And then they're going to come up and give a decision on what that's going to be, right? So they're either going to approve the change or they're going to reject the change, or they might just defer that change for now, right? It all depends on, risk versus reward and how costly is that going to be to make that kind of change. And again, also if it's going to be based off of a governance thing, or if it's going to change the value of the project. Because remember, at the end of the day, our whole purpose for doing this project is to deliver value. And if that change is going to affect the value and that value no longer aligns with our strategic plan for the organization, then you might flow all the way back from monitoring and controlling. You might move all the way back to initiation, and the big wigs above your head are going to make the decision of, yeah, I recommend we just go ahead and we take our losses here and cut our losses and move on and find another project that's going to deliver the value that comes up and it aligns with what we're trying to do, right? So
yeah, I had one rejected before, and basically it was rejected with caveats. If you could show a different way on this one, like a risk matrix,
right.
we can. So it was just like, hey, if you change one thing and we like it, we'll approve it. So you didn't have to go through the again.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's an important thing, right? So this process that you see right here is the process for integrated change control to a T that PMI expects you to know on this exam. So the first thing, there's going to be something that triggers the change, right? Then your job is to submit the change request. The CCB is going to evaluate the impact. They're going to approve or reject it. And depending on if they decide to approve it, you then have to update not just the project management plan, but you have to update all the subsidiary plans that are within the project management plan that change may affect, right? So you might be changing the quality management plan. You might be changing the risk. You're going to be changing a lot, to be honest with you. And for sure, you're going to have to make changes to your scope, schedule, and cost baselines, because that's going to be your new measurement that you have to measure against because you've accepted this change or you've approved it, right? So, and then the last part of that is you've bounced back to planning after that decision is made, right? In the process groups, you come up with the new plan, you update all the project management plans, and then you move back into executing again. All right. So, but you're executing the plan according to the new change. Okay, does that make sense to you, that whole flow?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
It's okay. Yep. So, okay. All right. So let's
I've
move
been
on
through that
here.
flow, so that one makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, good. Okay, so now you got work performance data flow, right? So this area here is tested pretty heavily, like you see up there, right? So these concepts, whether you're taking the PMP or the cap them. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here, even though we're going to go past noon, but that's okay. So I'm going to walk through the 3 levels of work performance output here for you, okay? Because it is critical on the exam, and they tend to give a lot of traps in regards to these 3 areas. So work performance data, this is execution 4.3, right? This is the raw output from project execution. So it's unanalyzed, uncontextualized observations, right? So say, for example, task A is 60% complete, or we spent 50,000 this week, or 3 defects were found, 5 resources were used today. This is all just data, and it means nothing by itself. It just is what it is, right? So in executing, you're basically collecting raw data. You following me there? Executing 4.3 task is collecting that raw, unanalyzed observations, measurements from your product activities. Okay. So your examples are right here. It's raw data. Then you move over here. So at level 2 of work performance, which is task 4.5, this is where you analyze that data against the plan. So what are the 3 documents that we're analyzing that data against? Do you remember? We kind of just touched on it a minute ago.
I know we talked about the CCB. Are you talking about that?
Yep. So this is we're not talking about change right now. We're actually, which is the CCB. But if you had a change, you're going to make modifications to the plan, specifically those 3 baselines, right? So what were those baselines? Because that's what we use to measure our performance against, right?
Yeah, like I said, I'm totally brain.
It's okay. So that's the scope baseline, the schedule baseline, and the budget baseline, right? So here you're going to take that raw data. Now we're going to analyze that data and make it information, right? So data is just data until you analyze it. Once you analyze data, it becomes information. At that point, we can now use our different tools, earned value management tools, and we can calculate where exactly our project is based against our 3 baselines, which are scope, schedule, and budget. So these tools in through here are what allow us to figure out if we're in scope, on time, and on budget, right? That's your measurement as a project manager, isn't it? Are you delivering projects in scope, on time, and within budget? Now, if you can deliver that scope or that value, right? If you can deliver it under budget and ahead of schedule, you're a rock star, right? The way I view that is if I'm delivering in scope, on budget, on time, that's a rock star to me, right? If you're doing it, if you're able to pull that stuff in ahead of time and be under budget, ahead of schedule, and you're bringing everything in scope and you're not cutting quality, that makes you a superstar, not just a rock star, but an actual superstar, right? And if you're not delivering with that value against those three baselines, then you probably shouldn't be a project manager, right? But there's going to be times and things that will affect you. So it's a matter of how close can you get at that point if you know a project's kind of running off its rails because of changes that have happened, right? You'll have certain circumstances. So say the warehouse that your production facility is in, a freaking tornado comes through and rips half your warehouse apart, right? Are you going to be able to deliver on time and on budget? No. If something like that happens, no, but it's a matter of, okay, here's how bad the damage is. And you're going to have to lead the way here and go, okay, can we move forward with this at this point? And if we do, how much is it going to cost us to do that? And you're going to have to take not that data, you're going to actually have to put it in information and communicate that back up where you'll slide all the way back to initiation again. And the higher ups are going to make that decision of, we're not just going to deal with that. We're just going to kind of cut our losses there.
When you were talking about hurricanes and all that, when I was in Georgia working for the Air Force, we always had tornado warnings. So we go, and that was an eye opener that we usually got more work done working remotely than in the office. So a lot of times people are getting a lot of stuff done ahead of time.
Right.
Because, human nature, your brain doesn't. So absolutely. I would catch myself jumping back on the computer late at night going, what did I miss? Let me see if I need to catch up on anything. And next you know, emails and sending more information out.
Gotcha. Okay. I've got my team. Sometimes they work from home. Most of the time they're working in the office because our new contract dictates that we all have to be in the government spaces. So, but again, you got lots of different things that can affect that. So back to this, right? We now got our information. We've done our analysis and we've made it information. Now we actually have to communicate that to our stakeholders, and we're going to do that using work performance reports. So you see the different kinds of things that you have there, and this is basically an information that's packaged and presented for stakeholders. So here's a trick for all of that, and then I got to take just a quick break right after this before we finish up.
I'm going to have to log off in a couple minutes, unfortunately.
Okay.
Because graduation is getting ready to kick off.
Gotcha. Well, we'll like I said, I'll end up finishing the recording as well. So, but think of it this way for this part. Think of it as a baseline, right? So your raw data comes from your execution, your analyzed information from monitoring and controlling, and then you shoot that off as a formatted report to your stakeholders. So a common trap here for you is you'll get a question like this: what is produced when the team performs project work in process 4.3? The answer is work performance data, not information, not reports. This whole thing is all about that work performance data. Okay. All right. Well, Mike, if you got to go ahead and sign off, go ahead. I got to take a quick 2-second break, and I'll be right back, and I'll finish up the recording. So later,
I apologize,
later, yeah, it's okay. Later, you can actually come back in and finish watching the whole recording again. Okay.
I'll do that for sure. Right. Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
You bet. You too.
Bye.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. We'll go ahead and we'll move right along here. All right, so key stakeholders in execution. Project execution is ultimately about people. So we're going to walk through these five key stakeholder groups and how you as the PM engage each one during the sessions or during execution. Your project sponsor. The sponsor's role during execution. Hold on a second. Your sponsor's role during execution shifts from the authorizer of the project to the executive champion, right? The PM should keep the sponsor informed through regular status reports and escalate issues that exceed your actual authority as the PM, right? So an RMC primary principle here is don't let surprises reach the sponsor. They should never hear bad news from someone other than you as the PM. Next, you have the project team. The team is your most important execution asset. Your job is to remove obstacles, develop capabilities, which, through 9.4, task 9.4, resolve conflicts, which is through task 9.5, and protect the team from disruptive external interference. Trust between the PM and the team is built through consistent behavior, clear expectations, and full-on recognition. Your functional managers. In matrix organization or just functional organization, team members still report to their functional managers. So the PM must maintain a collaborative relationship with those functional managers. Functional managers control your resource availability, and losing key resources during execution is a common source of project failure. So you really want to build that good relationship with those project managers, which I've talked about before. And then we have customers and end users. So early and continuous involvement prevents the most expensive type of failure, and that's delivering something that the customer doesn't want. Validate scope, that task 5.5 involves the customer formally accepting each deliverable. And then finally, we have vendors and contractors. Under the conduct procurements, which is task 12.2, the PM must actively manage vendor performance against the contract terms. Don't assume contractors will deliver without active oversight. Your job is to make sure that they're doing exactly what you contracted them to do. So the big PMI principle here is stakeholders ignored during execution become obstacles during closing. You want to engage everyone proactively as soon as soon as it's needed. Okay. So I've got 10 takeaways for you here today. Sorry. We're going to close with these 6 things I want you to remember from today's topic here. Number 1 is the 10 executing processes span 8 different knowledge areas. 3 are resource processes, because people management is your job. It's your number 1 job in project management. Second is process 4.3 is the heartbeat of execution. Everything flows through it. Know its outputs cold, which are deliverables, work performance data, issue logs, and change requests. All right. Then we've got talk about data flow. Data flow is exam critical. So data is raw, and that's from task 4.3. Information is analyzed, which is task 4.5, which happens to be in monitoring and controlling. And then once that data is analyzed and information has been put together, you end up communicating that via reports to the stakeholder. So this distinction appears on virtually every PMP and CAPM exam. The Tuckman model is real and it's important. So know the 5 stages of what the PM does at each one. Storming is normal. It's how you handle it that matters. Okay. And then understand the integrated change control. It's not negotiable. All changes have to go through task 4.6, no exceptions. The PM never approves baseline changes unilaterally. You don't have that authority. No verbal agreements either. All of that has to go through the integrated change control process. And the last one is conflict resolution matters. You're either going to collaborate and problem solve. That's always going to be the best approach. Withdraw is always the worst. PM addresses issues directly and privately before escalating. So again, try to handle everything at your level before you escalate it up the chain. Now, final thought here. Great execution is not about doing more. It's about doing the right things with the right people in the right way and protecting the plan while adapting intelligently to reality. All right, so that's all I have for you today. It brings us to the end of our session on the execution phase. I want to thank each of you for your time and engagement and excellent questions. So that's all I got for you today. Next session, we will go into the monitoring and controlling in a predictive environment. So thanks for your time. See you next time around, which will be next Monday. All right, have a good one.